but Sweet Auburn's coming up. Oh, hey. If you recall, we had determined, for the sake of this kind of discussion, that there was now a fourth S in the great erstwhile triumvirate in the necessary world, normally referred to as sex, shelter, and sustenance. Just the absolute necessaries that would keep a man alive, notwithstanding any ideas of civilization, culture, the intellect, individuality, and etc. But let's take the idea of the fourth S, that is speech, and expand the situation a bit in regards to what we were talking about of late. And that is that speech is like a bridge between the necessary world and man's secondary world. It makes the transition, which is continually going on, more palatable and comfortable. And historically, what we have had, and still have to some degree, is this is where religion seemed to have entered in, and even civilization, but most people see it specifically as religion, and it has entered in the area that we were talking about of external authority. It enters in and acts kind of like a verbal words from God to guide us cushion. If anybody can remember that, you can make your own acronym out of it. But that, see, it is a very interesting, to some people, and revealing spectrum going from that it just acts as a cushion. Now you should be able to see that, and don't get stuck on religion because that's of minor consequence specifically having to do with this. But in that, we're all dealing with the necessary world. That us and the alligators have all of that in common. And then we have something that alligators do not have. And don't say cable. But we have something that, in a sense, that if we were going to try and consider man could live without an intellect, which he could, sort of, then anything beyond the necessary is then man's secondary, that you don't have to discuss it and argue with it forever. It just simply is, compared to everything else here in this 3D observable world. And although you are now existing, in a sense, simultaneously across this kind of spectrum, all the way from the necessary world of you being the world's greatest redneck, you being a bricklayer, an automobile mechanic, you being semi-illiterate, almost a feral beast, you being labor, you being the assembly line, you living in your own basement, you living actively, assuming you're just ordinarily sane, actively in the lower areas of your own nervous system, brain. That makes people feel better. In the more reptilian old areas, as they like to say, of the brain, that they take it apart, and some neurosurgeons, I think one of them had a drinking problem, thought that he saw there, right at, sort of moving into the midbrain, he claimed he saw little areas heretofore uncharted that he said looked suspiciously like small little alligators. I don't know, I'm simply repeating what I heard. It costs no more. But there is, you are living simultaneously, if you're just sane and ordinary, in those two kinds of worlds. But nowadays, even though we can say that you could be alive, the people are alive, if you want to look at it that way. There are people in comatose states, there are people that are in comas, there are people, let's just say for the sake of speculation, it's no longer being great consequence, that there are people on this planet somewhere that are not in a coma, not in a hospital bed, that are, for all intents and purposes, whatever the hell that means, that they have no intellect working. If they've got no language, which somebody tried to make a quick buck a few years back, if you remember, somebody that I think lost their grant with the Smithsonian or National Geographic, claimed that they had found a tribe living in the Philippines that were actually Stone Age, that is, that had no language. It turned out, however, it was just some people from the Adjutant General Corps and attorneys back from World War II that had been stuck there on the planet. But if there were somewhere somewhere in the wilds of New Guinea or outside of Cleveland or Akron, people who could not actually talk, then you could say, well, here we have a human who is functioning and has no secondary world. He is just simply almost an animal. Uncivilized, which the only, regardless of all the kinds of little things that Kyroots points out for specific purposes, speaking is civilized. That's it. If your intellect in any human, collectively, individual, it doesn't matter. If the intellect is not fired to the point, past the midbrain, if you're not into the frontal lobes, if you're not talking, you're not a human. You may be alive, you could be healthy, and if they could in some way corral you, they might enter you in the Olympics and you might do well in the 440. But you're not really a human. You're probably a West German. Don't write me. Don't write me. Especially, I don't want any West German attorneys writing me. That's. But now everyone can surely see that it's kind of poetic, it's kind of metaphorical, and yet it's not. It's a fact that you are now living partially in a secondary world. You're living in a world that we can say we just did. And you can see it and you can't deny it. That in a sense you could do away with intellect. You can do a frontal lobotomy on somebody. You can cut out areas where they speak. For all intents and purposes, whatever the hell that means, you can stop a man from thinking. We can stop you from thinking now through surgery. Even crude surgery. We can stop you from thinking. And you might go ahead and live another 20 or 30 years. And you might even, we'll assume, could still feed yourself. Or somebody lay food in front of you, and you still might become erotically aroused and engage in you know what. And you'll surely take a nap. So you could do all those things, but you are not human. To live in both areas has been a continuing source of interest, conflict, theory, and surely you can begin to see it once I try to make it a little more blatant. It is the nature of recorded history, all the way from Greeks and ideas of mythological gods into the ideas of more modern gods into psychology. What they are talking about, what man is writing history about, what man is believing he's about through culture and art of, well, we're trying to reveal ourselves, we're trying to discover ourselves. They're talking about one thing. They're talking about the kind of discomfort of having to take on a whole new big S. Of having to take the three things that were necessary, that were inescapable to keep you alive, to keep the race alive, the three S's. And now there's another one. Another one. And in a sense, you don't need it, as we've already said, because you can, through minor surgery, you can do away with this and still live. So you can say, well, that's true. But then again, you'd have to say, yeah, but Jesus, life would even be less worth living than it is now. You know, things are weird enough, but Jesus, don't take away my brain. I know it almost drives me nuts. But at least every now and then I can go to the movies, or I can read a comic book, or do something. Along those lines, it didn't seem to be a great deal of response. But there was a Kyroot tonight that pointed out that life, in its wisdom, has provided sex, in a sense, so that on the primary level, everyone can have a friend. But life has also offered you a mind so that you can have a secondary one. The ultimate friend in the secondary world. So in a sense, a man is confronted, and humanity has been confronted, which I suggest to you. Years ago, that passed for being intelligent. People say, may I suggest to you? Because it seemed to infer a certain kind of intellectual humility, like, well, I know it, but I'm just going to suggest. May I suggest? If you're going to take a Western view of history, look at the Greeks. Start there, look at the Old Testament, look at all of European history, look at psychology, sociology, look at the arts. And in a sense, what they're doing is expressing a kind of discomfort of having to be civilized. That's it. It comes out in all sorts of ways. It is still a manifestation of trying to scratch where the nervous system itches. That is, trying to fulfill what the nervous system could do. Sex is going as far as it's going to go. Eating is gone as far as it'll go. Sleeping is gone in other words, the necessary world is, by, may I suggest, by my own description, perfectly fitted for its task. Which means that which is necessary has been done. Okay. The secondary, though, in a sense, is not necessary. But of course, now in a sense it is secondary, or you're not really alive. You're not really a human. And yet there's a discomfort to it. Because, again, if you're just ordinary and just sane, then you surely figured out how to screw, how to engage in sex in such a way that it offers a certain kind of gratification. That is, that you get through, and right then you don't want any more. In the same way that we'll assume that you're sane enough to go eat, and to eat food suitable for a human. So if you're hungry, you eat, and you think, well, that's enough. But that you sleep, and you wake up and think, do I want more sleep? And you think, no, that's enough. This, the secondary world, is not in any such a position. It is like it cannot fulfill, it cannot satisfy itself. It's not supposed to. But note, back again, can you not see that all of history, all of the arts, all of religion, everything that humanity has left a trace of, which is what I mean by written history, it is all man in a sense. I'm serious. Everything ever written, including fiction, in a sense, is humanity expressing its discomfort with having to take on this new job. That Jesus, now we got to talk. Well, which is think, but you got to talk. It's like, several million years, we got the rest of it down, and now somebody says, all right, now you got to think and talk. There is everything from Freud to Aristotle, Moses, Muhammad, Buddha, everybody. That's what it is. All right, Hemingway too. The intellect would seem divorced in a sense, or at least seem one step away from the kind of immediate genetic breastfeeding that the original three S's had. That again, assuming that you're sane, ordinary, every day, you do not have to be taught how to eat. You do not have to be taught how to sleep, etc., etc. And you could then say, psychology keeps playing with this, but I guess an ordinary man, even an educated, even a psychologist now would consider that the argument is still open. That they would say, well, it's still in some question whether speech is something nearly as instinctive or as instinctive as sex, or whether it's something absolutely learned, and as you know, they are continuing that kind of course. But ask yourself from a more abstract view, is speech, is thinking really taught? And if you're ordinary, you would fall. You don't have to be an academic in the area of psychology or linguistics or anything else, but you would have to say, well, it seems uncertain. Which, of course, proves that you're thinking in ordinary. You go, well, I don't know. Snap out of it. Brace up. If you're going to be a revolutionist, that won't do. But notice that the ordinary mind, all of collective wisdom, from the world of academia down to contemporary walking around intelligence, would say, well, you've got to be taught how to speak. Because parents do it to children. You've got to be taught how to think in a certain way. Why else do we have at major universities that require you to wear shoes and take a shower, that they teach logic, linguistics, how to think? That there is something being taught as opposed to sex being taught or how to eat being taught. May I suggest to you that it is not quite that, take your choice, simple or convoluted, either one you like. Even though the intellect knows that it is not complete and cannot seem to find any sort of, forget ambrosia, it can't even seem to find spinach. That is, it cannot seem to find anything that it can eat that satisfies. Now it gets close, which is, you've all had that experience. It's a kind of walking around momentary insight that you have some great thought. As Kyroots pointed out, that everybody seems to have great thoughts sooner or later, or a great thought, but they don't know what to do with it. It's the kind of feeling that you had maybe in your younger days on some kind of drugs, or maybe now, every now and then you begin to have it on your own. But if you were just ordinary and you have some kind of thought, like you're hearing somebody whine, you're hearing yourself whine, you hear yourself making some excuse, you're just in the midst of ordinary life, and suddenly something strikes you. There's no need for me to have to say what it was or how it was, but it's just that people, every now and then, and again, this comes out throughout history and fiction and everywhere else, is this feeling that people think, what in the hell am I doing here? Or what's going on here? It's just momentary. And I'm not talking about anything that's leading to psychosis, or worse, yet, that you even fall deeper in a funk and think, I'll become an accountant. I'll prepare taxes. No. Let's assume that you snap out of it. The intellect is absolutely unsatisfied. Just simply see that. Compared to, as I was pointing out, there's no trick to see that the appetite for sex, sleep, getting the body into some comfortable position vis-a-vis the humidity, the temperature, getting out in the precipitation. You can get satisfied. You can eat the right food and be satiated until further notice, for hours, maybe till the next day. The intellect cannot do this. It seems to have flashes every now and then with ordinary people that, Jesus, that's a great thought. But it always seems to be with ordinary people that they picked it up from an external source. That you're reading a book, and suddenly you're reading that Shelley, and it's just one line, and you're just reading along, and you go, ah! And you lay it down. You have to stand up, and you walk around. You look off. Oh, are you didn't like Shelley? Any book. But it seems to be that there was some external source of authority that you went, ah! And it was like a momentary, almost fulfillment of the intellect. But notice, it does not last. It's not supposed to, but notice, it will not last. The best one you ever had, the best shit you ever smoked in your life, the greatest insight you ever had, which most people seem to always come up to one, I suddenly realized, we're all brothers. Write that down. If you ever want to make a safe bet, those of you that didn't notice, all you got to. That's the great insight that everybody has taking any sort of even mild hallucinogenic drug is, we're all connected. At any rate, the great idea, but it always seems to come, if not from a book, from a drug, from some external change in your own brain chemistry. And it's like almost my brain is getting on track. I'm beginning to really think this is worthwhile. But it doesn't last. It doesn't last as good as a good pizza. It's not supposed to. It will not last. You have to run back to the book. You have to go, God, I got to get some more of this stuff. Do we smoke it all? Go get that before that guy leaves town. You have to keep going back. You're supposed to. So that the intellect will keep searching. They'll keep growing. But in the interim, not that far removed from Akron, as some of you know who have been in the Midwest, but in the interim, what seems to make life tolerable to ordinary people, what seems to be some sort of comfort station, is speech itself. That is, as long as men can whine about, well, I can't be satisfied, then they can become a philosopher. Or if it was not too late, I guess they could join up with Willie Dixon's band. Never mind. As long as you can say, I'm not satisfied, as long as you can speak, it's as though it is a comfort, it is almost as though it is a cushion between the necessary world and the primary world. Not that the mind, not that speech says, wait a minute, I've got it. See, that's the dream. That's the dream that I could find the food that would satisfy the intellect. But what makes it tolerable is even speech being able to say, by God, this is damn near intolerable. then you're all right. Kyroots put it sort of crudely, bless his heart, using such admirable terms as whining and sometimes serious, which sounds like a completely different thing from whining. I don't guess I should have said that, because some of you now may not be able to ever watch especially network news, because they're more serious than local news. Well, I'm sure that some of you would have thought, if I'd asked you just kind of point blank or insinuated some kind of cheap prize, some luggage or something, if I said, what's the difference between whining and being serious, you would have worked on it like, well, let's see. Don't waste your time. See, that's why I say it may be ruined now, because anybody serious is whining. Because anybody serious is a critic of life. Anybody serious, and the more serious they are in the collective sense, people that seem to be news commentators, political leaders, all the great thinkers of the world, to be serious is to believe that you know what the problem is. That's serious. Serious is not, wait a minute, I'm going to tell you what's going on. After that, you don't have to hear it. No matter how they're dressed, they're Cassandra. That's all that's going to come out. They're going to say, I have studied this matter for blah, blah years. I have done all sorts of things. You can say, hey, skip the preface, go on and whine. Get it over with. Wind it up. That's all they can do. But notice also that if we were ordinary posses attempting to attack the city, then you'd take my comment, Kyroots' comments about whining, as going, yeah, that's true. Everybody whines. Everybody's bitching and complaining. But it passes as being serious. It's just that somebody really starts playing with it, like Kyroots doing and all these things about whining, then you can kind of giggle and laugh. But what else can man do at the intellectual level when he speaks except whine? Now you could do other things, and people do, quote, let's say accidentally, do other things. But they do not make much of an impact. You don't have to take my word for it. Go to your public library. Find books that contain, well, that's too cheap. I started to say contain no whining. Find books that are not, that the core is not a whine. May I speak for an individual, somebody somewhere, and go, well, wait a minute, how about the grand and glorious message, the positive message of religion? Are you serious? The man has a small tumor passing through a brain. And yet the very fact, back to what I was going to try to get you to see, the very fact that you could take Kyroots and our notation of life being almost a constant whine, if you're ordinary, then you could take that as a criticism. You could say, well, you're right. Jesus, all we do is whine and bitch. It's not really that. It is a comfort. It's not condemnable, not with ordinary people, to say, quit whining, shut the hell up, quit bitching and whining. I mean, you can say that to somebody, but if you're going to say it to somebody, you just hadn't noticed. You're saying that to the whole world. Because everybody is whining and bitching. It's as though the intellect, compared to this, the stomach does not have to whine. Just an ordinary stomach in an ordinary part of the world. Because if the stomach wants to whine, it eats. If your naughty parts want to whine, they go find someone else's naughty parts and says, you want to dance? And if your sleep parts want to whine and you're just ordinarily sane, you lay down and take one. But it's this. If it's hungry, which it is, it stays hungry. If you're sane, if you're ordinary, what can it do? Because it cannot find anything like a good screw, a good meal, a good soft bed, so what can it do? And I can go ahead and say, all right, it whines. That's all it does. It just continually bitches about this and that, and the world's coming to an end. And, forget the sky falling. The sky's already fallen. Now the chickens are falling. And if you're ordinary, you can go, oh, yeah, boy, this is my kind of show. I like to hear somebody wising off to life and sticking it to everybody. But that's not true. Because what we're calling now whine is a comfort. It is a comfort bridge between the necessary and the primary. Even though, in the sense that I was pointing out, and all of you can nod along in agreement, especially the Philistines out there in TV land, and say, yeah, that's true, that we're just all given, especially everybody else, to bitching and whining about the least little thing, and some people about the biggest little thing. It is a comfort. It is a cushion between the necessary world and man's secondary world, which is now as necessary as the necessary world. And the whines, even the whines of saying, God, I'm so sick of whining. I'm sick of not being able to satisfy myself here. And of course, ordinary people sometimes say, here, I can't satisfy myself artistically, socially, psychologically, spiritually, and it's all this. The whine that I cannot do anything is a comfort. Because once you can talk, what if you couldn't whine? There was a Kyroot tonight that perhaps was a little too abstruse. They point out that if men did not criticize the way life works, life could not work as well as it does. That is not a crackerjack Zen arrow. It's a fact. As long as you're bitching, you're alive. As long as you're bitching, in a real sense, things are improving. At the ordinary collective level, it's meaningless because you're not going to live long enough. Or even if you did, chronologically, you would not live long enough here, you would not have progressed to ever see a change yourself, because in fact, the older you get, you join in with that guy who said, why is it the closet seems to get smaller? Or put another way, that was just kind of an update, is you all know this. Don't look at yourself, God forbid. Look at everyone around you. You know, even your blessed relatives and everybody else, the older people get, Jesus Christ, they get bitchy and crabby. I mean, even people, an uncle or a grandmother you thought that was, a little on the testy side, when she was 50. Now she's 90, God forbid. She's intolerable. She's still alive. I bitch, therefore I am. There is a continuing, this really starts having to stretch, which some of you surely can do, the idea of time, to call this a transition, because it is a continual transition. It is not that one time that as soon as you found recorded history, if we said 6,000 years ago, the very first piece of recorded history is man's secondary started, which we could say that, and you could say there was the transition. We could say that. But you've got to realize the transition is still going on in you, in everybody. And the transition has got to be comforted in a way. You are continually replaying. You are continually trying to bridge the transition between the secondary, the necessary and the secondary. You're living in both, but it is still uncomfortable if you're ordinary, because you always feel like, well, there's something I don't know, there's something I can't find, and what can you do? Let's see. I knew, damn it. It's EA, external authority. Let's see, what's everyone else thinking? There's your answer. Just look around and everything will be fine. Check with everyone else. I'm glad I could be of service, whatever they're thinking. That's all.